I know that you have lots of good things to share. Where would you like to start your memories?
I think we have to start in my childhood, where I was born in Mansfield, Ohio. The last of 4 children within 5 years. And lovely, lovely big house. I thought it was big back then, with 4 bedrooms, a double garage, a lovely backyard. The backyard had a sandbox, a plum tree, a Bartlett pear tree, a Roman Beauty apple tree, a spring apple tree, and it was bordered by a fence full of grapes. 3 kinds of grapes. White Niagaras up by the house, blue Concords in the middle, red grapes, whatever they were at the end, and a couple of currant bushes. And I can remember my father would tear a sheet every fall, prune the grapevines, and you would have these little strings of white things all over the fence all year long until the grapes bloomed again, fruited again. We had an open lot next door and a large garden, and Mother did a lot of canning, green beans, and all the stuff you grow. That eventually became a house. They built a house on the property. And when it rained, we put on our bathing suits and went out and made mud pies. We had a park a block away, and they had tennis courts and a building where you could go and have a picnic if it rained or whatever. So one day, Lena May and I came home from tennis, starving, hot, thirsty, and we sat on the back porch steps. And I looked to my left, and there was the garbage can, and the lid was off because the can was too full. And I opened up the paper, and there was all this pink watermelon. Oh, that sounded so good. We sat there and ate, cleaned up those watermelon peels. And that satisfied us for that time. In those days, Woolworths was a busy place. And every girl had what she called a hope chest. And I had a seer chest. And you want the hope chest is when you get married, and you're going to fill it with all these things you take through marriage, you know. And we would buy pillow slips at Woolworths that were already stamped and sit on the back porch and embroider them. I was never really bored. If I thought I was bored, I would find pretty little glitzy stones, like pinky. Some of them are pink, some of them are white. And I'd sit on the back steps with a hammer and hammer them into pretty powder. I didn't do anything with the powder, but that made such pretty powder. That's what that picture reminds me of. I have a picture in my bedroom of a little girl holding a branch of some kind of a leaf for a lamb to eat. Perfectly bare except for the lamb and the little girl. She's a little Indian girl. That reminds me of me because it's such a peaceful scene. She's happy, and so's the lamb. And at the hammering the stones, I was happy. I was hammering stones, but I wasn't angry. But I made the pretty stuff. And I made pretty pillow slips. When I was about, I must have been, I'm not sure, 8 or 10, my Uncle George, my father's brother, and his wife were going to go to the Philippines. And they didn't want to take their 2 children, Bernice and Johnny, because they didn't know what the Philippines were like. This would be around the 1930, maybe. So they said, my mother said she'd keep them. So we had my oldest brother, who was 5 years older than I, and then my sister, and then my other brother, and then me, and in between there were Johnny and Bernice. For almost a year and a half, they lived with us. The girls had their own bedroom, the boys had their own bedroom. Mother's mother had her own bedroom, and Mother and Daddy had theirs. That was the 4 bedrooms. Our house was the place where everyone came, for parties, for dinners, for anything. No one else did that. Mother was the only one of her whole family that did that. She was the one that kept her mother, all of that.
Your grandma came to live with you, your mom's mom, right?
She lived with us quite a while, a long time. And I remember when she died, I was in college and I had to go home for the funeral. And I got on a bus and sat down and waited, and other buses pulled out. Finally the man comes to our bus and he says, all ready for Mansfield, or no, for Newark. And I said, no, I'm going to Mansfield. Oh, he said, this is the Newark bus. The Mansfield bus already left. So they arranged for a taxi cab to take me. They stopped the Mansfield bus, gave me a taxi cab. I didn't have any money to pay the taxi cab, let alone when I got home. They waited for me, and the taxi cab took me to the bus, and I finally got home, and we were right there, and they waited till I went in, got the money to pay the bus fare.
Do you think that would happen today?
Nope. Not in a million years. But the interesting thing was, in those days, when someone died, you put a wreath on your door. If you had the measles, you put the sign measles or quarantine or something on your door, measles or mumps or something. And when you died, Grandma was laid out in our living room. Her coffin was in our living room.
Yeah.
And Uncle George, at any rate, bought 2 bikes. So we shared the 2 bikes, 6 of us. My father, who had a college degree, electrical degree, became a piano tuner. He was allowed 2 weeks vacation in the summer, and that's when we could get in the car and drive up to Michigan, went up to see the quintuplets, went up to the Sault Ste. Marie, the northern part of Michigan. The thing I remember about those trips is that I thought Michigan smelled the best I'd ever smelled. It was pine smell all the way up. Of course, we didn't have very tight windows. These were old cars, old Fords. I don't know what year. But those were long trips, and we carried a tent, and Daddy cut the back seat so it would lie down flat, and the 4 of us would sleep in there, and Mother and Daddy would sleep in the tent. We went fishing, caught fish, cooked fish, camped. We were dressed. My brothers had socks and ties and shirts. My mother wore camping. My mother had a garden hat, long, big brim, long black dress. And my mother was a teacher. She was a very good teacher, and she had patience like a saint. I remember one night we were all sitting there doing homework, and she came by just looking and checking. One of us had algebra, one of us had some kind of a foreign language. I don't know what the other ones had, but she would help us in anything we needed help in. When I was in high school, I took French, German, and Latin. I could read before I went to school. When I did go to school, a young boy made fun of me because I could read. The teacher asked me to read something, and he said, baby, 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 and I cried. We went to church every Sunday, come hell or high water. My father played the organ. I don't remember any other person on that organ bench except my sister. He played all through our childhood. My mother would line us up, 1, 2, 3, 4, at the doorway to the pantry, which also had a John in it. We hung our heavy coats in there, and at the end of it was a pantry, and here was the John. And before we went to church, she would put a chuck roast in the oven, and Daddy would wait for us, and we would line up, and each of us definitely went to the bathroom before we walked out of that house. We never ever got up in the middle of church to leave to go to the bathroom. And we had pencil and paper and sat in the front row, and were quiet.
And you still sit in the front row to this day.
To this day.
When did music start in your family, and how did that play out with your siblings as well?
Louise and Leo and I took piano, and Marshall took violin. My grandfather, according to my aunt, wanted to be a concert pianist. And so my father learned the piano, obviously learned the organ. So my sister and I joined the choir. And eventually, as we got older and got into high school and could play piano, he would let us play the organ recessional. He'd let us come up, and he'd get off the bench, and we could play the music. Louise mostly. I was younger. We did 2 piano work. My piano teacher, my sister and I did duets. Another student of the same teacher, we did 2 pianos, and we ended up doing 2 pianos, 8 hands, 4 of us, 2 at each piano.
Oh, wow.
And we gave recitals, and we memorized everything. Not the 2 piano work, we did not. When I did my own recitals, everything was memorized. And I got into some very, very good music. I could play fast, and I could read fast. I could read. You could turn the page 2 measures ahead, and I knew what to play. I could sight read like mad. I played here and there and everywhere. When I put my scrapbook together of my programs, I played for the McDowell Club, for the Junior Music Club. I played at the Leland Hotel for something. I played at someone's house. I did this, and I thought, when did I do? I don't remember doing all that. I was always playing somewhere. And Ohio was a great state for competition, musical competition. And I remember I got a letter once, I have it somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it, from a young man that was competing in trumpet. And he won. And he sent me a letter to thank me and said, if you hadn't played for me, I know I wouldn't have won. Wow. And I just did stuff like that. I was doing that all the time, and I thought, when did I have time? How did I get there? Who picked me up? Who drove? What? I don't remember doing it. You're just so busy doing things. I wrote the class song. I couldn't tell you what it is. It wasn't anything exciting, but our class sang the song.
For your high school?
Yeah, in high school. And then Johnny and Bernice went back to be with their father, who ran rubber plantations all over the world. And they had that was a very exciting thing to have cousins that had been abroad like that, over the world. You didn't fly anywhere, you took a boat. They would take freighters.
Right.
And took forever to get mail.
What college did you go to?
Ohio State.
Ohio State University.
Walk in my door and you can see I went to Ohio State. Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. So we all graduated from Ohio State. When I graduated, I was one of 4, I was told, in my class that got the highest salary to teach music, $150 a month. We had a chosen symphonic choir that competed nationally and won the national award for a symphonic choir. And as a result, we got to go on a 2-week trip, bus trip, but there were about 30, 35 of us. And Professor Dirks and his wife performed at a couple of colleges for 10 days, not 2 weeks, 10 days. Ended up performing at the CBS Theater in New York City, and that was a big deal. Delta Omicron is the professional music sorority. And when I was in school, I was the president, and because I was president, I was a delegate to the National Convention in Estes Park, Colorado. Part of the program, I played Debussy's Reflet dans l'eau. I hit Ohio State at a time when there were not many people that could play that well. I played for the university chorus, the symphonic choir, and all the voice lessons. As a consequence, I learned German lieder, arias, operatic arias, all kinds of music I would never have a chance to learn again if I hadn't gone there when I did with whatever talent I had to give. And I did, and it was just fortunate for me. I was blessed to be able to do that. Then we were going to do a piece by Lili Boulanger, who had died, but when she was 19, she had won the Prix de Rome in France. Her sister Nadia Boulanger had already helped develop a school of arts, American arts, that young people came to from all over the world, from America, from Europe, from everywhere. My professor, harmony professor, knew of Boulanger, knew that she was in this country and she was giving lectures. She had lectured at Yale, she had lectured at Ohio State, she lectured at Ohio U, she was traveling, she was the first woman to direct the Boston Symphony. And he knew about her, and he knew about the school. So he picked her up at the train station so she could conduct that concert that night. And on the way back, according to him, on the way back to the school, she was asking, are we having an orchestra for this music? No, we have piano. Or we have 2 pianos. No, we have 1. And she became very interested, and she found out that she had 1 piano player, and that's the one that was going to do this, and I guess she was rather surprised. Apparently, I followed her directions very well. After the concert, which went well, went back to the dorm with my mother and sister, and I said, And Daddy didn't come back, and my piano teacher had come to the concert too. Didn't. I said, "Where's Marie and Daddy?" And my mother said, "Well, they're talking to Mademoiselle." About what? And my mother very calmly said, how would you like to go to France? I said, "Sure, I'd love to go to France." 1938, my father's a piano tutor, I'm going to France? "Sure, I'd love to go." We're kidding. She said, "No," she said, "I'm serious. That's what they're talking about. Giving you a fellowship to France, to that school, in Fontainebleau, France." Well, they came back, and I was offered the fellowship. Wrote to my sister, who was in her first year of teaching, and said, "How would you like to go to France?" And so she saved her money, and the two of us went to France that summer for the summer session.
That's 1938.
1938, on the SS de Grasse, and those were the days of the big Queen Mary and the big Normandy. They were big, powerful ships that could get from here to Europe in 4 days. And while the SS de Grasse was creeping along, the Normandy came along and honked its foghorn, and we all went and waved to the big Normandy. But we got there in about 6 or 7 days, I guess it took to go across. You didn't fly, you took the boat. Well, we got to France. Mademoiselle, I was worried that I had this fellowship. I had my picture on the front page of the paper, and I thought, oh, now they expect me to become a concert pianist. I don't want to be a concert pianist, I really don't. This was on the front page of my hometown paper.
Oh my goodness. Piano protege going to Paris, studies abroad. Look how young you are. So you were how old exactly?
19.
19.
There was a telegram from Dr. Hughes, the head of the department. It said, "Mrs. Hughes and I congratulate you and wish you and your sister a good trip," and so forth. But then he said, "By no means spend all your time in study." And I just was so relieved, I couldn't believe it. But he knew what it was like, what it would be like. You're in a foreign country, you have a chance to see the world, you know. So study, but do something else too. But Mademoiselle said, "Come to my apartment before you go on to Fontainebleau." She had an apartment in Paris. So we had directions, and when we got off, we went to her apartment in Paris. She was having a couple of men. They were single men. They were having an afternoon tea. And when we got there, and so she introduced us to Mr. Russell, Mr. Copeland, Mr. Anderson, Mr. what? It was Mr. Copeland. It was Aaron Copeland, I found out years later. I had no idea who he was. This is before he became famous, I think, too, but he's written so much beautiful music since. And he's already been honored by the Kennedy Center and all that. The school took us on trips.
Okay, that was lovely.
And one was to Versailles, and they took us on the day that the fountains were playing, when they only played 4 times a year. And they took us on one of the days that they were playing. And they took us to Chartres, which is the cathedral that has a famous rose window in it. But this is right before the war, and the rose window had been taken out and replaced by something less nice. They buried it to keep it from getting spoiled, because there's something about the blue in the glass, and that's the rose in the glass that they couldn't duplicate. And they took us past the President of France's home, which was being refurbished. It had scaffolds all around it. They took us to Notre Dame. They took us to the Opera House in Paris. Different places, different times. I took piano, and I took harmony from Boulanger. I took piano from Robert Cassages. I practiced 4 hours a day. Every big composer in this country has been connected with her. They were all very good teachers. And at the end of the year, the end of the summer, we got certificates. The palace at Fontainebleau is where our school was, in Louis XIII's palace. This is the back of it, and what we called the carp pond. Now the front of it had horseshoe steps, and they were famous because people who got married would go. It was good luck to go to the steps and go up the horseshoe steps at the Palace of Fontainebleau. This is pretty much. This was from the New York Times. They chose to visit that school the same year we went there, so my sister and I are in this picture. When I was there in 38, we were already having blackouts. The war was imminent.
Oh, look at this.
This is, yeah, you think that's fancy?
I like the signatures of all the
Everyone.
professors.
Oh, yes.
So you met my dad at
Voice class.
at school.
A voice class. And then he'd ask me if I could play for him to practice sometimes, and I'd play for him, and he wanted to give me money, and I wouldn't take money. I said, you're trying to get through school just like I am. I'm not going to take any money. And so to make it better, he felt better by asking me out to the movies. So we started going to the movies. That's
And then how long?
we formed a friendship.
It lasted how many years?
24.
24 years.
Well, after we were married, 24.
married.
Yeah. I was living in Eaton, and he was living in Lexington. And he came up and he said, we're either going to get married or we're going to split. And I said, we're going to get married. And we could not envision my mother and grandma's family being in the same venue for a wedding of the two of us. So we eloped. So we came to Mansfield to live for a while, and Jim was called into the service, went to Columbus to be inducted, and the doctor examined him, and he said, I don't know what another doctor would do, but I'm not taking you. He had a bad valve. He finally decided this is a chance for a singer to go to New York. This is where they all want to go. Years later, when he was on the other side of the business, he said there are 1,000 good singers in New York. They're all good. That's why they're there. They're good. They just want to be there at the right time in the right spot, like he was. So he went to study at Juilliard. I had a job with Time Life. But when you work for Time Life, if you're 6 months pregnant, you have to quit. They didn't want you after that. And I had to leave Time, so he had to get a job. So we went to audition for Fred Waring. Fred Waring put people in the shows. He was the one that, go there, have you got anyone? We need some guys, whatever. So I played for Jim to audition for Fred Waring. And standing there was Fred Waring, Robert Shaw, Don Craig, who directed Waring's Men's Glee Club, and Jim sang. And when we got through, Robert Shaw said to me, and he was nothing at that time, he had just come to New York, said, do you sight read? And I said, yes, that's actually my forte. He said, can you come back tomorrow? I said, sure. So I went back tomorrow, and he gave me a manuscript of Hindemith, his composition When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed. And I played a couple of rehearsals for Robert Shaw, which now is very famous because he's famous. And but I can always say I played for Robert Shaw, and that's a big deal. But just a couple of rehearsals. I became a professional accompanist. We moved to the by the Hayden Planetarium, right on the corner. That was our first one. That's where Jimmy was born. Then we moved up a couple apartments up 79th Street. Had more room because I was pregnant with you. But meantime, I had a call from someone that said they were on tour for Columbia Concerts, and his accompanist got appendicitis and couldn't go. And he said, can we try an aria? So we did. I remember playing Vision Fugitive from Salome. And we just got a couple measures into it, and he threw himself on the chair. I said, what's the matter? Oh, I'm so relieved. He said, can you go on tour? Can you go on the tour? Can you play for me? So we talked about it, and Jim said, sure. Starting, the very first concert was in Lexington, Kentucky, at the University of Kentucky. And I thought, isn't that simpatico to have, I'm back in Lexington. Now I'm at the university, I'm not at Transylvania. We did that, and then we went down to, and it was during, I remember on the train, it was Mardi Gras time. The train was full of people celebrating, it was wild. On our way to, called Tri-Cities, I think it's in Alabama. That was our second concert. And then we came up to the Cannon Mills where they make the cannon towels. That was our third concert. And after we got back, we also did a concert at the Gardner Museum in Boston. Remember where they took all those expensive paintings? They stole them. We gave a concert there. From New York, when Jim he went from NBC TV to WQXR, the good music station in New York, very much respected. Then we went down to Baltimore and Washington area, moved to Silver Spring when Kevin was, by way of Dobbs Ferry and Yonkers and Dobbs Ferry. Grandma came to live with us when we lived in Manor Club in Rockville, Maryland. We came to Cheshire in 1960, went to the Lutheran Church. He needed a piano player because his wife was pregnant with her fourth child. And he said, "You can just play the organ." I said, "Well, I can't play the organ." We said, "Well, you don't have to do the pedals, just play." So I did, but once you get on an organ bench and you have all of these stops, you don't know anything about the organ or the pedals, you do it. You make yourself do it, you got to learn it. And one night after choir, pastor was talking about, he always kept us up on new music and books and stuff, talked about a book for children that had come out, and Nita Walls came up to him and said, "You know that book you were talking about that just came out?" I just brailled that book. And that lit a light in my head. And I said, "Brailled? What, can you braille anything?" I wanted to braille music. She said, "Sure. Braille French, you braille Spanish, you braille science, you braille anything." So I said, "Oh, could I do that?" So she taught me brailing, and I brailled for the junior high school in our churches. I couldn't do music until I'm certified in braille and in rhetoric. So the church certified me in rhetoric. Then I took an exam with the Library of Congress, and I'm certified in the Library of Congress to make rhetoric braille.
Daddy died in 1964.
And married Ed in 80. And we were married for 27 years.
You were widowed, and then you met this wonderful Ed that we all loved and adored.
18 years later.
18 years later, you were widowed. That's a long time. And you and Ed had the blessing of much traveling, seeing the world.
Everywhere. Beautiful.
And actually enriched our lives by having his family join our family.
By his family.
Vice versa, right? We've joined each other. So they love you dearly too.
We came to Cheshire, and we lived out at 2188. I was in the community theater playing for the shows. 9 to 5 job. Come home, get dinner, go to community theater, and then come home and braille.
And then Ed passed during the transition period of living down the street on South Main Street, and you moving here to Elam Park. How many years have you been here?
8.
8 years.
From 07. This year will be 9. 7 to 16 is 9, right?
Wow.
Right.
And you still attend the Cheshire Lutheran Church, but you are retired as an organist.
Oh, yes, been retired for a long time.
But you did the bell choir there and children's choir and the organ as well. So you were busy, and you worked full time until you married.
And I worked 9 to 5.
You have established a name for yourself, not only for the sing-alongs and all the music you've done, but you have other talents, and many people in your life, family and friends, have received crocheted quilts, crocheted blankets and things like that. So you still continue at your age, almost 99, soon to be 99.
I did the 12 Icelandic sweaters plus for adults and a small one.
Yeah.
Small one in 1 year. I quilted, I did hand quilting, I made quilts, I knitted, I crocheted, I still knit and crochet.
Sewed clothing.
I've made dresses and things. I did everything.
We have a couple questions that have been submitted by a couple family members. I asked for solicitations of questions that they might be wondering, that they would like to hear from you. So,
question 1, if you had to pick one thing, what habit, practice, mindset do you most attribute to your longevity and health?
Being busy.
Being busy?
If you want something done, give it to a busy person. If you sit around in a chair and don't do anything and someone says, would you do this? Yeah. No, if you're of the nature that you have to be busy, you would get it done. Yeah, but I think it's a characteristic. I'm born Capricorn. Capricorns are goats, Capricorns are climbers, Capricorns are do it and do it and do it till you get it done. So that's why I have done crocheting and knitting and brailing.
Second question, if you had to pick one thing, looking back over almost a century of life, what is the most important thing to always keep in mind over the course of one's life?
Integrity. No matter what you do, integrity.
Do it with integrity.
It enters everything. You do it right or don't bother.
Could you have even envisioned a different path?
No. I can't imagine my life being better in any way. You can't have a life that doesn't have its negatives and its positives. And you can't avoid them. I have been blessed so many ways, so many times, all along. You can tell by my story. I was there when they needed me. I could do it. I did it. I could do it over, but I do it the same way. Nothing, I have no dreams. It's all been done. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Life is amazing. I have been blessed from beginning to end. It's not all perfect. It can't be perfect because you wouldn't appreciate it if it were all perfect, if you didn't know the difference. And you get through no matter what happens. You just keep going. There are things to do and people to see and problems to solve. The world is just beautiful. Everyone has their own characteristic and they're all beautiful. Our national parks out west, they're all different. They're so different. It makes them so fascinating. What caused it, what made it, what made the canyon? Years and years, millions of years. No final words, it's just life is a blessing. Enjoy it. Use it and enjoy it.
Excellent.
Yep.
This will be seen by generations from now. So,
Good luck to all. Good luck to everyone. You've got to have the spiritual. That's part of life. You've got to have it somewhere, as well as the practical. Why not be happy? It's easier. I mean, when I look back at the education and the love I have for words and declining in languages and whatever goes on, I didn't like history, but that's all right. I liked other things. But learning, I think I'm by nature curious on a lot of things. How this works, how the computer works and all that. It's just fun because you're learning things. There's so much of all that you say to yourself, how many books will I never read? How many stars will I never understand? How much astronomy will I never know? But it's there. It's there to learn. It's there to visualize and understand, or whatever you want to do. Pick it. Pick your problem and learn it. Have fun.
Birds fly beyond the rainbow. Why, oh, why can't I?
Those are the bluebirds. Feel the bluebirds just flying all over the place.
yeah.